Hey, hello, Ben here with Studio on the Lake once again. Hey, today we're going to be carving a wooden kid sword for the Viking dwarfs that are going to show up. The coffee's on, so let's get started. See, as the snow starts to melt, Grandma and I have a problem. The dwarfs leave swords laying around to be picked up and played with at random when they show up. But this character right here got a hold of one in the big thaw. So we have to fix that. That one is not fixable, so we'll be building a new one. I'm going to go ahead and start out here with a standard 2x4 from the scrap file. You look in the center there, it's got a nail hole. And since I don't need that big of a sword, we'll just work around that. Handle needs to be small enough. There's the layout. And we'll saw it out on the bandsaw and get the blank ready to go. One of the things about working with an old 2x4, it's not the best wood in the world. Went ahead and drew a center line on there, and I will continue to do that throughout the project just to keep things symmetrical. There is a character in the group of the dwarfs running around who will point out that there is some blue on there. Grandpa, there's some blue on there. What is that? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's goblin blood. That's what the sword's for. Killing dragons, goblins, that sort of thing. This grain is just nasty, and then you'll notice at one point in here there is a couple of knots in the middle of it. If you were to get a little cleaner piece of wood, that would work out just great. Really doesn't matter at this point. This thing's going to whack and slash and hack everything that moves without some rules, which we'll go over here a little bit later. At this point, I went ahead and switched to a knife. It's just easier cutting back against the grain. Put a couple stop cuts in here to keep this thing from... we don't want to cut up the blade portion of the sword, just want to get the handle rounded. You'll recognize that knife from one of the other videos. It's a Ramelson, and this, as with most of them, is down in the description with a link. While we're at it, if you want to take a look at those other videos, in the lower right-hand corner of the screen there is a subscribe button. Just go ahead and click those and subscribe, and we can let you know what other videos are available and the ones that are coming out in the future. Got some fun stuff planned for you. It's starting to look like a sword. Don't have a whole lot of choice here in the vise setting this thing up. It's a little close for working with the draw knife, but I'm not going to hit it. So most of you trolls out there, don't give me grief about working too close to the vise. I'm well aware of that. I have nicked those things in the past, and I can take a whetstone and clean that up. More likely to hit a nail in a tree clearing the bark off than I am to whack that vise. That having been said, I'll probably be taking a nick out of this thing. Take a look at that grain, every different direction. You thought I was going to get it right there. I know you did. I can see it. Easier to switch to a knife here. There in my left hand, you saw those little marks. And this piece right here, I didn't saw it out very straight. Once again, it doesn't have to be that pretty. Simply because what they're going to use it for is whacking everything under the sun. Here's a few simple rules. Grandma and I both kind of set these up. You don't get to whack old Groot. That's not quite right. This character here, fair game. Grandpa's shins. Ouch. And this guy goes without saying. Lay out a quick round tip. Don't need a spear point. This thing does have to have a safety feature, because these characters, some of them can handle this sword pretty well, and others not so much. We don't want anybody damaged. At some point down the line, I have plans to do a nice katana sword out of wood. And I'm going to pick something with grain that's straight and won't be dealing with all of this. Of course, that'll be a little more professionally done. This one's for beating up rocks and other people's shields. Dealing with that knot right there in the middle again. Putting a fuller in it. The fuller in a sword, as everyone knows, gives it a little strength. Not sure about a wood sword having a fuller, but it's got to be there. Or one of those Viking dwarfs will mention that something's not quite right with this. They do know when the design is not correct, and they will let you know. This is a spoon gouge. It seemed to be pretty logical. And just like the rest of the tools I'm using, down there in the description, there is a link for those. It's a pretty handy tool. There, starting to look like a sword. Time to put a guard on it. Yeah, the measurements on that guard will be about this wide, right in here. Finally found a good piece of wood. About that big. Okay, see me run my thumb over that pitch pocket right there? That's why we're cutting a piece out of the middle of this board. Not to waste it intentionally, but there's a piece of pine pitch that goes all the way through there. Being the high quality wood that it is. Find the center line. Not a whole lot of design thought went into this. We're just doing something that looks symmetrical. Kind of like the wooden spoon. It needs to look like what it's supposed to be. I will occasionally pull down a pattern from the internet and work from there. And sometimes these kids come up with ideas and what they want, and you kind of have to work with them on the design. There, it's kind of roughed out. Got a lot of goblin blood on it still. I don't know how much of that will end up in the end product. Started out with a hammer and decided, you know what, this is easier to do by hand. Just going to inset that down a little bit. Give the glue something to grab onto. Here we're doing a little actual carving, just kind of rounding over the edges. You'll notice that I'm cutting in both directions if you're trying to learn to carve. You can see that I've got a stop cut thing going there with the thumb cutting to it, and then when I'm pushing away from it, I'm kind of levering the blade around a little bit. We're just trying to round it over, not make it too fancy. We'll take the rough edges off and splinters with sandpaper. This is 2 tubes of 5-minute epoxy. I like this stuff. Same thing that comes in the syringes, only for about the same cost you get 4 or 5 times as much, and you can use just a little bit of it. Kind of a fun deal here. I'm looking for something to mix it up with. Yeah, pull up a scrap from the floor and I'll trim it, but guess what? I don't have a knife. Not a knife handy, but I do have that hook knife, spoon gouge, or spoon knife, I guess it is, and I'm having a little trouble figuring out where the blade is on it, but in the end we win. There's only 2 ways this can go on, and a lot of times the first way is the wrong way, of course. Yeah, and looking at this back, that guy's got special ed, just putting it in the vise. Should have taken that and closed the vise down a little bit instead of hitting the handle on the edge of the sword each time. But hey, it's a lot easier when you're watching as opposed to doing. Liberally apply. This stuff I'm mixing up now is quickwood, and I'm just using it to fill the gaps. It really doesn't have a particular amount of strength to it, but it does make it pretty. You get it worked into the cracks with a knife and then take off the excess. Do it right on the bench. That's what benches are for. I never want to see a pretty bench in a woodworker's shop. Not necessarily one with holes drilled in it at random and saw marks and that sort of thing, but it needs an occasional ding, or it's just not used. You'll find some folks out there that collect stuff and put pretty shops together. Mine has a tendency to err on the side of practical. I don't think I own a screwdriver that hasn't been used for anything but driving screws. They're bent, broken, chipped. I do take a little better care of the knives and the carving tools, I gotta admit. Rounding over the end, I noticed that I was flipping back and forth, and Grandma told me, knock that off, stand still. So in future videos, I think I'll stand still. I really don't have to go to the bathroom. I'm just shifting my weight back and forth. Got the end rounded over. A little sandpaper take care of the splinters that may still be there. Well, there you go. That's a fine looking sword. I think people will like it. I need to lay it out there for the dwarves. I didn't finish it. There's no reason to. This thing's going to get abused, pounded, whacked, stabbed, and just treated poorly. They'll be smiling when they first see it. It'll be the greatest thing in the world, and then they'll take it and smash it into a tree. I like it. Good fun. So there you go. If your kid needs a sword, build him one. Hey, once again, thanks for watching. This has been with Studio on the Lake. Right-hand corner down there, if you subscribe, you get some more videos. And it'll help me out, support the channel.